AI is making it easier than ever to write code. That sounds great. Until you are the team responsible for everything that has to exist after the code gets written: the infrastructure, the deploy path, the secrets, the permissions, the cost, the rollback plan, the weird Terraform change someone generated at 4:30 on a Friday and swears is probably fine. Because when app teams move faster, platform and infrastructure teams do not magically get less work. They get more change, more pressure, more risk, and a lot more questions about whether the systems around delivery can actually keep up. That is really what this conversation is about. Not just AI, not just Terraform, not just infrastructure as code, but what happens when software delivery speeds up and the people running the infrastructure have to figure out how to keep things safe, reliable, governed, and still usable. Hey, I'm Brian Teller. I work in DevOps and SRE, and I run Teller's Tech. Ship It Weekly is where I filter the noise and focus on what actually matters when you are the one running infrastructure and owning reliability. Most weeks, it's a quick news recap. In between those, I do conversation episodes with people who are building platforms, running infrastructure, organizing events, and thinking through where this whole industry is actually headed. Today is one of those conversations. I'm joined by Gareth Kersey to preview IaCConf 2026. IaCConf is a free virtual conference focused on infrastructure as code, platform engineering, DevOps, and infrastructure operations. And the theme this year is basically how infrastructure teams keep pace when AI is changing the speed of software delivery. And I like that framing because it gets past the lazy version of the AI conversation. This is not just, can AI write Terraform? It probably can. Sometimes badly, sometimes usefully, sometimes like a tourist who learned just enough of a language to confidently order the wrong thing. The better question is, what happens after that? What happens when developers can generate more code, ship more changes, and push product roadmaps faster? What does that mean for DevOps, SRE, platform, and infrastructure teams who still have to deal with the blast radius? In this conversation, Gareth walks through the IaCConf agenda, including Quinn's keynote, sessions on AI and infrastructure operations, platform engineering panels, Kubernetes, Argo CD, AI agents managing infrastructure as code, governance, policy, and the risk of 10x code velocity turning into 10x operational risk. We also talk about how IaCConf has grown, why people seem hungry for an event that goes deeper on infrastructure as code, and how they are trying to keep it community-focused instead of turning into just another vendor marketing conference. That part stood out to me, because infrastructure as code is one of those topics that sits at the intersection of almost everything now. Terraform, OpenTofu, Pulumi, Crossplane, Kubernetes, GitOps, policy, security, cost, developer experience, internal platforms, and now AI-generated changes being pushed into systems that were already complicated enough before the robots showed up. So if you work around infrastructure, platform engineering, DevOps, SRE, or you are just trying to figure out how to keep your delivery system sane while everything around it speeds up, this one should be worth your time. All right, let's jump in. Today I'm joined by Gareth Kersey from IaCConf. We're doing a fast preview of IaCConf 2026, what the theme is, what talks are worth bookmarking, and what infra teams should be doing now that AI is changing the pace of shipping. Gareth, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Brian. Excited to be here.
So I'm interested to hear, what does keeping pace mean?
Yeah, so it's not a surprise probably to anyone, with whether you're in engineering, you're in any sort of field operations function, what AI is doing to kind of everyone's day-to-day function, right? Everyone's feeling the pressure to move faster, do more with less. And I think one of the biggest places that has been upended and really drastically changed is software engineering, right? The rate at which you can spin up an application, you can code with Claude Code. And what does that actually mean on the other side for operations teams? Well, now you've got developers who are shipping way faster. That product roadmap is getting through a lot faster, but that application code isn't always going to be the same, maybe level of quality or the thoroughness that are security checks. What does that mean for infrastructure? All the kind of the downstream operations that are needed to actually sustain that application deployment. Is that actually keeping pace? So that's what we mean by keeping pace. And obviously, with it being infrastructure as code conference, IaCConf, we're really focused on the infrastructure operations components of that. But we do have a lot of sessions that touch on more than just infrastructure as code, because realistically, whether you're a DevOps, SRE platform, IaC is one piece of the puzzle that you're working with. And so we've got several talks that talk a little more broadly about keeping pace in terms of like the operations standpoint.
So that's a good precursor. What are the talks? Let's kind of dive into that.
Yeah.
I saw some of them. You had mentioned some of the speakers on the IaCConf page. Can you give me just a high level overview? Who is speaking? What are they speaking about?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we've got a really good agenda this year. It's a mix of, a couple panels, a couple talks that are more, framework point of view on the market, and then a few talks which are down in the weeds, more demos. So we've tried to create a nice array of topics. And so this is, let's see, we did IaCConf, the first one in May of 2025. That was 13 sessions, really great response, a lot of good feedback. Then we did a securities focused virtual spotlight in August, and then we did an AI focused one. And every time we do it, we collect feedback on what people want. And people like to have the in-talk or the in-depth demos, but they also, like to hear the panel discussions and people just talking about what they're building. So we've tried to create that variety. So I can kind of give you some of like the high level agenda overview and kind of what these different talks are shaping out as. So first we've got Quinn. He's running the keynote. If you're involved with Amazon Web Services, AWS, you probably know Quinn. I think I came across him first maybe like 2020, and then I saw him do the AWS reInvent like vendor crawl. And it was just like he was like dressed up as a zookeeper, like going across these different vendors. And it was just hilarious. So his talk is what he's labeling AI speaks Terraform like a tourist. So really, really excited for him to kind of kick it off. When we were talking about his keynote, there's no right answer in any of this, is what it comes down to, right? Whether AI writing Terraform is going to help in some areas, whether going completely away from IC in general for some of these things and having AI just directly provision infrastructure and everywhere in between. The keynote is meant to kind of set the stage of, hey, there's a lot of places that you can go to. And obviously it has a little bit of Corey's humor built into it.
Awesome.
So from there, we've got Matt Gowie, who's a founder and CEO of a consulting company called Masterpoint. They're a partner of Spacelift. He's got a great perspective on the industry. He has a lot of clients. So he's talking about kind of how AI is upending infrastructure operations. We're kind of running two tracks at different times of the day. We're starting off with two tracks after Corey's keynote. And we've got two folks, Emin Elmadar and Flavius Danu, who are practitioners. They've worked at Spacelift, but they're going to talk about how to get started pretty easily with infrastructure as code with an AI flavor. And they're actually going to run into an open source project called Intent about how you can actually stand up very quickly some AI provisioning, both with IaC and then an AI driven workflow path. From there, we're going to jump into Ante Babenko, who, if you all know TF Weekly, he's a big voice in the Terraform infrastructure as code space. He does a lot with Terraform modules. That's what he's known for, producing these modules that everyone loves and goes to repeatedly. So he's got a session specifically around replacing Terraform module forks with policy transformation rules. We then jump into the first panel of the day. We've got two panels, and this one is really interesting. So it's going to be moderated by Luca, who is over at Platform Engineering org. If you know Platform Con, Luca Galante is all things platform engineering. And we've got three folks on that panel. The first is Chris Haas, who's the CTO of Mondelez. So Mondelez is the massive food manufacturer. I think they own Cadbury's and all different sorts of confectionaries. So he started as a director of platform engineering and he's made his way up, and now he's the CTO of the organization. So great in-house expertise. We've got an individual, Fasal, who's the principal of platform engineering for a services firm called Ahead. So he's got a lot of experience talking to all the services partners and his clients. And then we've got Eric Maxwell, who's actually a co-author of Dora and works at Google. So that panel is going to be really interesting perspectives from 3 different individuals, all about platform engineering and what does it actually mean with now AI agents being consumers of your platform. So then we get into some more technical sessions. We run this on 2 tracks we call the main stage and the builder stage. On the main stage, we've got Amin talking about when 10x code velocity could mean 10x operational risks. So that idea of application code development is rapidly increasing, but what does it actually mean for your downstream operations? And then Davlet from Cloud Genie is going to be talking about how to safely deploy AI agents that write and manage your IaC. On the build track, we've got a couple interesting talks there. So one is this gentleman by the name of Joseph, who the title of this session is really interesting. I deleted 4,000 lines of AWS CDK and shipped faster. So he's going to get down into the details of a specific scenario he ran into. We actually simplified his AWS deployment, was able to go faster. So again, keeping pace. And then Atesh Main from Philo is going to talk about infrastructure at scale using Argo CD. Kubernetes deployments, we're talking about what might be some future topics for IaCConf. A lot of Kubernetes interest, maybe not surprisingly, and a lot of session submissions and ones we've done in the past. So I think that's going to be a popular session. Around 2:30 Eastern, we go into our second panel of the day. And so this panel is actually a combination of different tech founders from a couple different vendors in the DevOps platform engineering space. So we've got Marcin Wyszynski, who's the co-founder and head of R&D at Spacelift. We have Chris Evans, who's the field CTO and co-founder of Incident.io. And then we've got Ganesh Datta, who is the CTO and co-founder of Cortex. And what they're going to be talking about is, we're seeing this is working for our customers. These are the people who are actually talking to people every day, building products that DevOps platform teams are using to try to keep that demand and how they're thinking about building those products. I think this will be really interesting for maybe those platform engineering teams who are thinking about almost internal product development for their teams. What does that actually look like inside one of these vendors? This is also going to be moderated by a woman named Serena, who used to be the head of JP Morgan and Chase product developer platform from a UI UX standpoint. So she's got some really interesting experience. She used to be at Red Hat on the product UI UX teams. That's going to be a very, I would say, product-centric panel, thinking about how do you build this platform for this 10x velocity and all the things that, again, they're hearing from customers, which I'm sure there'll be a lot of customers of any one or maybe a combination of those products in the conference.
Very cool.
At 3 o'clock, we're going to move over to, again, 2 tracks. So Dmitry Vlachos, who's the CMO of Spacelift. This is our second year running the infrastructure automation report, and we surveyed 400 individuals across platform and DevOps engineering functions and asked them about their adoption of AI. How's it going? What's the adoption rate of AI among their development teams versus their operations, specifically infrastructure operations? And what does that gap look like? There's some really interesting findings there. Drop a little bit of a hint. Some of the biggest gaps are around the governance around those AI deployments and what does that actually mean in terms of productivity and time kept back of having to go back and check what's been done because of lack of guardrails that are in place. Alexandra is going to run a session. This is very much a build session of something he's built around AI enforced architecture. And then we're going to close out the day with Jean, who is a principal engineer at Sanofi, the large pharmaceutical company. And he's going to kind of round out the day about talking about platform engineering in general and how to do that without slowing developers down. Again, rounding out the theme around keeping pace and what does that mean in 2026.
Interesting. So I've seen, like, over the last year, IaCConf has grown, especially with this next upcoming conference. And is a lot of that just from feedback? Like you mentioned, we're doing 2 quote unquote stages now. There are panel discussions. And what has caused like the changes and where do you see it going long term?
Yeah. So on the first one we did, which was again May of 2025, we were optimistic, but the response rate was more than we anticipated in terms of the registrations, the attendance, but then also after the event, we surveyed everybody. Hey, what did you like? What do you want to see more of? What suggestions do you have? And the response was overwhelmingly positive. From the logistics standpoint, even people saying this is the type of event I would actually travel to, because there still is a gap in the market in terms of something that's specific to infrastructure as code as a conference. You have your KubeCons, you've got, the AWS summits and the reInvents, Google Next. Those are all great conferences, but they're quite broad, right? And so this filled a gap for, what is the niche of infrastructure as code? And I think with the content that we curated, it hit the mark. And so the feedback that we heard was, well, one, keep it up. This is exactly what we want more of. People want stories, they want demos, they want real world scenarios. I think there's always the balance of being able to have that kind of framework discussion of here's what good looks like versus uh, like the actual real world scenario of, yes, and here's how I applied that in my actual environments, and here's how you can go on Monday, turn around and start doing it yourself. So that's the biggest thing that we've tried to do. Every one of these events we run, we go and survey the audience and say, what did you like? What did you not like? What do you want to see more of? And try to do that. And we've also done that with trying to run these in person. We've done two so far. We did the first at KubeCon when it was in Atlanta in November. And then we did a meetup in Amsterdam back in March, because the other half of it is people just want to connect, network, meet other people who are working with infrastructure as code, and build their own network. So I think that's the extension of what we want to make this more of is, yes, the primary is an events platform, allowing people to have a platform to share their story, share their knowledge, a place for people to come learn, but then also a platform for people to go connect with others who are working with infrastructure as code. And whether that takes the shape of the next place we've done was in-person events. From here, we want to build out a content board, a jobs listing board. There was a lot of comments around, hey, it would be great to have a Slack community or some sort of community where people can go and have real live chat. And so that's the objective, is to keep building it, allow people to connect, still have the events platform so people can share their stories and learn from each other, but create more of those forums, whether they're in person or virtual, for people to actually connect with each other.
Do you see the cadence keeping up with that pace as far as like what, one or two virtuals per year and then one or two in persons, or?
Yeah, so we did Amsterdam. So for in-persons, we did Amsterdam. We're going to do Salt Lake City, which is, I think
KubeCon?
it's November.
Yep.
A lot of demand for doing something at reInvent. Vegas is a bit crazy at reInvent, but it would be great to try to put something together there, even if it's a networking meetup style or a happy hour style. We have discussed some ideas of doing some more regional city-based events throughout the year, perhaps partnering with like a local DevOps meetup or the AWS has a lot of user groups. So I'd love to explore that. I'm in Boston. We're talking about trying to do that shortly after IaCConf 2026. In terms of like the virtual cadence, so yeah, we'll definitely keep with what we call Spotlight series. So we have this annual event, 13 sessions. It runs from 11 to 4:30 Eastern. But then we did two of these spotlights last year. So one was security. So this intersection of infrastructure as code and security, that was 3 sessions, and that was August. And then we did one on AI in January. Again, 3 sessions. And those went really well. So I definitely think there's more of those we can do. I mentioned Kubernetes being a really hot topic. Definitely think we can do a session based off of the submissions we've got and the interest we have on Kubernetes and that intersection of infrastructure and Kubernetes. Open source is another topic that's come up a lot. And then there's a lot of like those intersections we could have of infrastructure and going deep in one specific area. And then we've also talked about, we get a lot of submissions. I think we got 50 submissions for IaCConf 2026, and we can only take so many. I'd love to be able to do one-off events. Hey, this is a submission we didn't get to. We're going to run it on a Thursday in June and just give somebody that platform to share their story. It helps them build their credibility. It's something they can add to their resume. They can add to their LinkedIn profile. This is a presentation I've done, but it also gives the community another story they can go and listen to and think about how they can take that to their environment.
Yeah, for sure. And so it is a free conference, to be clear, too. So
it's free. Yeah.
Is it recorded? So like, let's say I couldn't attend. Can I see those talks after the fact?
Yeah. Yep. So we have a YouTube channel, so we post everything there. Typically within a week, we'll get things posted up. So yeah, if you miss it, you can go catch it on YouTube again a week, 10 days later. If you're also not sure you can attend, register, because as soon as we do send an email out a few hours after the event, and then you can go access the events platform we use, and you can go browse any of the sessions before they get to YouTube. So yeah, even if you're not sure you can attend, register and you can go access the platform immediately afterwards.
So, given all of the submissions that you have gotten that maybe you weren't able to get to this time around, have you seen any trend? Like, is there any industry trends around AI or around Kubernetes specifically that you've seen with these submissions?
I have to go back and look a little bit. I mean, so it was on this IaCConf 2026, there was a pretty wide spread of submissions around, again, this idea of keeping pace and what does that mean? We had some that were more keeping pace from the application side
Hmm.
and ways that they're thinking about the application development. And I think there's ways to actually there could be some interesting discussions around bringing people who are more focused on the application side and then someone else on the operations side. And maybe it's a team who's worked together to figure that out really well. On the Kubernetes, you know, well, one, it's Kubernetes is such a broad topic. I think people were last year, Crossplane was one of the most, I would say, sought after sessions we had at IaCConf. Now, if you actually looked at the chatter and the questions that were coming up in that, and actually even the presentation itself, no one was super confident on Crossplane. Now, it doesn't mean, but people are still interested in how can I make Kubernetes work for my infrastructure and what does that intersection look like? So the demand is certainly there. Obviously, Kubernetes is not going away. We've got conferences dedicated to it. So there's plenty of people out there looking to learn and explore and see what's possible. I think my overarching takeaway in looking at the submissions is there's no right answer. People are still figuring this out. There's a lot of experimenting. I think what's going to be really interesting from this is where the conversation kind of centers around, because the chat becomes really interesting during these sessions where a speaker says something and then it seems to spark a conversation in the chat and you can like almost see through the screen people's like light bulbs going off like, yes, I get that, that makes sense. And there were certain sessions last year that triggered that, and given that this year's topic is a bit more focused on this keeping pace and, well, just the environment, May 2025 to May 2026, the world of software engineering and what that means for operations has changed dramatically, right? So I think it'll be really interesting to see kind of what those spark moments are in some of these talks, because that will be a good indication for us. And we'll definitely publish it once we do that, because we did this last year. We can see all the data on the back end, like what those topics were and what sparks those, what are the questions asked. So we get to actually kind of get some sort of an idea of what the themes are. We'll do a write-up and we'll definitely publish that once we have it, because I think it'll be interesting for a lot of folks to read that.
So, like a report around like the analytics, I guess, of what you're able to glean from the conference itself, like from
Yeah,
the
like
participants. Yeah.
yeah, like what was the most attended session? Like what was the highest interest rates of the content?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds interesting. I'd be curious to read it for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
reading like the Dora report every year. It's very interesting to see just the state of the industry where it's headed, especially over the last few years. As you've said already, AI has kind of changed everything for everybody. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's been a real shift. Did you have cross-plane talks previously? Or would you just had submissions around cross-plane?
We had a crossplane talk in IaCConf 2025.
Okay.
Yep.
And how does that, like, jive with, Spacelift? Like, your IC platform, right?
Yeah.
It's kinda like promoting a separate product in a way? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so part of right. So I'm on the Spacelift team. I'm employed by Spacelift. I'm on the marketing team, but we have been very deliberate in IaCConf. Spacelift funds it, right? But we do honestly try to keep it separate. So that means we open up the CFPs. We want to get people in talking about things. What are the popular topics? Crossplane was a popular topic. It was a great submission. And so for the better of the community, that's what people want to hear about. It doesn't really matter if that, is a competitor of Spacelift. In the end, it's not really a competitor of Spacelift. I think it's more of maybe a cultural difference of the team adopting it, right? If I
Yeah.
want to go all in on Kubernetes versus I want to go all in on traditional, terraforming GitOps approach, well, that's a separation. Once you make that decision, that's a bit of a competing, maybe philosophical, is that the right word? I don't know. Methodology of how you actually want to deploy infrastructure. But even if it was in that, GitOps Terraform space, again, if the community wants to hear about certain topics, that's what we want to create IaCConf for. I've even thought about it would be really interesting to have like a tacos panel, like get some of the founders from all these different platforms and have them talk about what they think the future is of, Terraform orchestration platforms. The IaCConf is just the platform to make those conversations happen.
It's great to hear. I mean, so I've been to a lot of like vendor sponsored conferences, and sometimes they lean too heavily in marketing. It's nice to hear that IaCConf is more interested in relaying the technologies that matter to the practitioners that are
Yeah.
attending over trying to sponsor Spacelift as a product. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's not the only motivating factor. Like I said, I don't want to name names, but I've been to other vendor led conferences that were very heavy into that vendor ecosystem at all costs, which can be detrimental to the overall conference itself. So it's
Yeah. Yeah.
just good to hear.
Yeah, we have our own set of, Spacelift events and sessions where we can talk Spacelift, but that's not what IaCConf is for. It's a platform for the community, and Spacelift just helps fund it.
So if there was, I had time to watch one talk, is there one or top three talks that you would say ahead of time that I should maybe check out? Let's say I was very busy, I just didn't have time. I don't want to put you on the spot. If you don't want to name one, that's fine too. But
Yeah, well, I haven't all like the first round drafts of presentations are due in like later this week,
okay,
so I actually haven't seen anything yet. But I mean, there's a few talks that I think are going to be interesting. I don't know if I can like give you an order, but well, like Corey, again, if you've seen any of his videos, his sense of humor and his approach to just talking about AWS and all things infrastructure is always entertaining. So I'm pretty excited about that. I'm really excited about this gentleman Amin, his session is when 10x code velocity could mean 10x operational risk. If you were to put a session not so much focused on infrastructure, but on this keeping pace topic, that's exactly what his session
Yeah.
is about. And what does that actually mean for all the downstream operations teams? So I think that one will be really interesting. The panel in the agenda is the platform engineering experts panel with Luca, Eric Maxwell from Dora, Farsal from Ahead, and Chris from Mondelez. I think that's going to be really interesting because you've got three very different but aligned perspectives. You've got someone who's in-house, started as a director of platform engineering, now the CTO. You've got someone at a major services partner who's working with a lot of clients, and you've got someone at Google who co-authored Dora. So I think there's just going to be a lot of really interesting perspectives on that. And then the one that I think is like, it's his background looks really interesting. The submission also looks really interesting is Alexandra from, I believe it's Anovo, AI Enforced Architecture Fitness Functions at Scale, on the builder's track, a bit more technical, a bit more down in the weeds. That one's at just around 3:00 Eastern. I think that'll be a really interesting session that'll get some good engagement.
Very cool. So for anyone looking to register, how do they check you out?
Yeah. So IaCConf.com is the main website. We've got, there's an events section, and you can see within there, it's the featured event. You can also find us on LinkedIn. We've got an IaCConf profile page. We're releasing every few days, featuring a new speaker. And so those are probably the two best places to go get some more information.
Awesome. Great to hear. Anything else you'd like to leave our listeners with, Gareth?
Yeah, I'd say the reason that IaCConf has grown to what it has is by listening to feedback from the community. So if infrastructure as code is of interest to you, you're either trying to learn it, use it daily, or you lead IaC initiatives at your organization, register, get on the list, attend, and let us know what you think. Again, we're building this community for this audience. And so the best way to help us build is to let us know what you like, what you don't like, when you want to hear more of. So this is a really exciting project. We want to do more of these events. And so, yeah, please join us on May 14th.
I'm looking forward to it personally. Everyone else, please check it out as well. Gareth, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Brian.
All right. That was my conversation with Gareth Kersey previewing IaCConf 2026. My biggest takeaway from this one is that keeping pace sounds simple until you actually unpack it. Because for infrastructure and platform teams, keeping pace does not just mean moving faster. It means absorbing faster change without turning your platform into a junk drawer. It means giving developers better paths to production without giving up governance. It means figuring out where AI helps, where it creates risk, and where human judgment still needs to sit in the loop. And honestly, that feels like the real infrastructure conversation right now. Not AI is amazing, but not AI is useless. More like, okay, The code is coming faster now. The pull requests are coming faster. The experiments are coming faster. The platform requests are coming faster. So, what has to be true for infrastructure teams to handle that without becoming the bottleneck or the cleanup crew? That is where infrastructure as code still matters. That is where policy matters. That is where reusable patterns matter. That is where platform engineering matters. And that is where events like IaCConf are interesting, because they are bringing together people who are actually dealing with this stuff from different angles: practitioners, platform teams, vendors, consultants, open source folks, people deep in Terraform, Kubernetes, GitOps, governance, and AI driven workflows. I also appreciated Gareth being pretty clear that IaCConf is trying to be a community event, not just a vendor event with a nicer logo. Spacelift helps fund it, but the topics are broader than Spacelift. They have had crossplane talks, they are talking Kubernetes, they are talking Argo CD, they are talking platform engineering, DORA, incident management, governance, and the bigger operational impact of AI speeding up software delivery. That matters, because practitioners can smell a thinly disguised product pitch from a mile away. And this seems more like a useful place for infrastructure people to compare notes on where the work is actually going. IaC 2026 is free, virtual, and happening on May 14th. Gareth mentioned that even if you cannot attend live, it is still worth registering, because the sessions will be available afterward through the event platform and later on YouTube. I'll put the link in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, follow Ship It Weekly wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want the show notes and links from this conversation, head over to shipitweekly.fm. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you later this week.